Good day, good day. I hope you're doing well. We are in day 22 of our Bible reading where we've looked at Exodus 13, 14, and 15. I'll be giving lessons to these chapters as some of the verses I've highlighted, but as usual, I'll begin with a quick summary of these three chapters. Now, what we saw in the previous chapter is the institution of the festival of Passover, so the Passover celebration. And this Passover is a celebration, it's a festival that the Israelites are going to do in all their generations as they remember the day that the Lord delivered them out of Egypt. And what happened on Passover, as we know, is that they had to smear some blood on the doorpost. And when the angel comes to kill the firstborn, whether of a person or an animal, when he sees the blood in that household, he passes over. So that's where the name Passover comes from. But what also happened on that day when they left Egypt is that they left Egypt in a hurry. And that is why they were told that when they eat the Passover lamb, they must eat it in a hurry. Why are they eating it in a hurry? Because they needed to leave Egypt in a hurry. And what's important is that it is not because they are running away in fear, because remember, it is God who is delivering them, and God cannot deliver people who must now run away in fear. They were not running away in fear, they were being chased out of Egypt. Why? Because the Egyptians themselves were afraid that God would kill more people because they have now seen the death of their firstborn children. And based on seeing the death of the firstborn children as well as the firstborn animals, they did not want more disaster to come onto their land, and they chased out the Israelites, and that is where they had to leave Egypt in a hurry. And because they left Egypt in a hurry, they were told to eat the Passover lamb in a hurry. They had to eat it with in speed, with a belt tied on their waist and sandals on their feet, because they are ready to be in a journey to live in a hurry. And one of the things that they were told to do is that they were to eat unleavened bread. So unleavened bread, we can also say it's bread which did not rise. You know, when you're baking, the bread must rise, and it becomes bigger because it's rising as it's in the oven. But because they're in a hurry, there is no time for them to eat or for them to wait for the bread to rise. Now, one thing that you begin to note is that the origin of unleavened bread, or bread which is not risen, it's not that risen bread is a sin. That's not where the origin is. It's not that there's something wrong with risen bread. It's that they needed to leave Egypt in a hurry, such that there was no time to wait for the bread to rise. Of course, over time, the meaning of unleavened bread or leaven or yeast begins to be compared with sin or false teaching. But in the beginning, it was more about the fact that they needed to leave Egypt in a hurry. So that was what we saw in chapter 12, where the Passover festival was instituted and we see its origin. Then chapter 13 institutes yet another festival, and this is the festival of unleavened bread. And that is why I wanted to give us the summary also of chapter 12, or what has happened in chapter 12, so that it makes sense in terms of what's happening in chapter 13. In chapter 13, we see that they're told that they also need to observe a festival of unleavened bread, meaning that they are to have this bread without leaven. They're gonna eat bread which has not risen, right? And the yeast which allows bread to rise must not even be found in their territory, must not even be found in their household. So that's what we're seeing in chapter 13, that not only are they to celebrate the Passover, they are also to celebrate the unleavened bread. So basically, the great departure from Egypt led to these two festivals, the festival of Passover as well as the festival of unleavened bread. Now, chapter 14, we see that they cross the Red Sea, and they are followed by the Egyptians, and God shows his glory once again, because the Egyptians harden their heart. Well, God hardens their heart. They want to follow them because they see that these people are stuck. And then we know it's a popular story, they then get consumed in the water as the Israelites are delivered, and they see even the Egyptians on the seashore. And this is where we get the popular phrase that, the Egyptians that you see today, you shall see no more. And then chapter 15, we see, because these people have now been delivered, remember the end of chapter 14, they're on the other side of the Red Sea, because initially they felt stuck, but now they're on the other side. They see a great deliverance from God. And chapter 15, we're seeing that they now celebrate. So they are singing songs. So in chapter 15, we see a song of Moses. We also see Miriam singing as well. So we're seeing a celebration, given that they've been victorious. But even though the celebration, we also see a little bit of complaints already starting to take place, because they need a bit of water. And then we're going to see some of these complaints continuing as we go on with the book of Exodus. Even beyond Exodus, we're going to see more complaints taking place. All right, now let's go into some of the verses that I've highlighted. Also, starting with in chapter 13, I've highlighted verse 7, which says, "Unleavened bread shall be eaten for 7 days. No leavened bread shall be seen with you, and no leaven shall be seen in all your territory." So I love this verse, because while what they're celebrating is to eat unleavened bread, it says you should eat unleavened bread for 7 days. They're saying that, okay, we're celebrating a festival of unleavened bread here, so you must not even have leavened bread. It must not be seen with you. So it's like one step further to doing what? To eating unleavened bread. In other words, one could say, okay, it makes sense. Let's all have unleavened bread. We're gonna eat unleavened bread. We'll keep the leavened bread in our cupboards. We won't eat the leavened bread. We'll just eat the unleavened bread because we're celebrating unleavened bread festival, right? But however, the instruction here says, actually, no, don't even have the leavened bread with you. And then it goes even further. It goes away from don't even have the leavened bread with you. It even says don't even have leaven with you. Remember, leaven is yeast. Yeast is the one which you are adding when you're baking to make the bread rise, right? It makes your bread rise. So, one, this risen bread or leavened bread must not be with you. Two, even the ability to make leavened bread must not be with you. I'm like, that is quite interesting, because the main point here is not for them to not have these things. The main point is for them not to eat them. And as long as they are eating unleavened bread, that should have been fine. But however, it did not end with them just simply eating unleavened bread. It was said that they must not even have leavened bread, nor should they even have leaven itself to make, or to even have the possibility of making leavened bread. And what we learn as a lesson here is the nature of obedience, the nature of how we ought to obey God. That in as much as we're supposed to do right, we must not even have something which can cause us to do wrong. Or even the ingredient, because something which can cause us to do wrong is maybe the leavened bread, but also the ingredient to make the thing which can cause us to do wrong. Like the leaven itself, you must not even have it. It must not even be seen in your territory. It really reminds me of what Jesus teaches when he says how we should deal with sin. He says if something causes you to sin, you must cut it off. Don't even have that thing. Of course, when you're speaking about cutting off your hand or removing your eye, speaking metaphorically, but he's telling his people that they should deal with sin decisively and thoroughly. Don't even have the leaven. Don't even have the ingredients that can cause you to create something that can cause you to sin. Imagine that chain. Because the leaven is not the sin. The leaven creates the leavened bread. The leavened bread is not the sin. The leavened bread is only when you now eat it, according to them obeying the festival. And I think that is why over time leaven would be seen as symbolically representing the small thing you add which can spoil and become the leavened bread. So that's symbolically. For example, false teaching, meaning that you have a small false teaching being added onto this baking thing, and then you have a bread which rises, but it was created with a small false teaching. And then the problem is that totally what you have is leavened bread. So don't even have the ingredient that can cause you to sin. So that's where the idea of leaven or yeast being compared with sin, or being compared with something that can cause you to sin, the ingredients that can cause you to sin. Not to say that yeast in itself is sinful, or risen bread in itself is sinful, but to say that the small things which are ingredients to cause you to sin, you must be careful of. And some of those things are patterns in our lives, disobedience. Some of them are false teaching, where Jesus would say in the New Testament, beware of the yeast of the Pharisees. All right, let me move away from verse 7. Verse 17, when Pharaoh let the people go, God did not lead them that way of the land of the Philistines. When Pharaoh let the people go, God did not lead them by the way of the land of the Philistines, although that was near. For God said, lest the people change their minds when they see war and return to Egypt. I find this verse very interesting, because it is actually saying that God did not choose to lead these people, the Israelites, through the land of the Philistines, which was near. Because if they went through the land of the Philistines, they would now be going into yet another battle, yet another war, and maybe return to Egypt. I find this interesting to say, God, but you could have just wiped the Philistines. Like, why does it matter? Could you just fought and wiped the Philistines? Because you're God Almighty, you're a God of war. But for me, this shows that God does not just simply choose battles which are not yet ready to be fought. He has his own timing, because of course the Israelites in the future are going to be fighting a lot with the Philistines. However, number one, we can actually see that God is not just a God who's chasing to fight with people, or to have his Israelites to be fighting with people. He's not intentionally just wanting to get into battles unnecessarily so. And therefore, it's as if God is saying, okay, I'm going to choose peace, that for now I'm not going to have these people go into the Philistines. It will happen later, yes, but for now, no. But the second point I want to raise here is the realization that God actually cared for his people and the condition of their hearts. The condition, he might have realized that maybe these people are tired, maybe these people, they've just come out of one battle with Pharaoh and his people. Why should I lead them yet to another war? So it's as if God knows which battles his people are ready for. And I find that encouraging. There's a verse which speaks of that he doesn't give us tests that we are unable to overcome. He knows exactly where we are and what we can overcome based on the current strengths we have or the lack thereof. And I find this to be, I even want to say the statement that God is a practical God. Like it's like, wow, this is so practical. Like he doesn't want his people to go into war. Even though he's God, I mean, he could just beat the Philistines up himself, but he doesn't do that. It's like, okay, no, let's find another way. Right? The last verse I've highlighted here is verse 21, which says, and the Lord went before them by day in a pillar of cloud to lead them along the way, and by night in a pillar of fire to give them light, that they might travel by day and by night. This is a very popular story or passage where we know that the Israelites were led by the Lord by day in a pillar of cloud. The reason the pillar of cloud is to protect them from the sunshine, so that they're walking in the shade, right? And the shade means that they won't get tired and burnt out by the sun. And by night by a pillar of fire to give them light, meaning that the purpose of the night time is so that they can even have light. So it's a very familiar event that most of us are aware of. And one thing that is familiar about it and popular in teaching is that he's a God who walks with his people. So there's that sense of walking with God, or God walking with his people, which is great, that God is with his people. But one thing that I've just noted is the last phrase, which says that they might travel by day and by night, as though God wanted them to have momentum, that you keep going. I'm just thinking, even missionally, we keep going, we don't stop, right? We keep going, day or night, in season, out of season, that there's a sense of keep going, keep going, keep going. They could have rested and slept and said, okay, it's night, let's just sit. But it's as if God is saying that no, let's keep going. Because the word was not saying that it's just light for the sake of light, to say, okay, so that when they sleep, they don't sleep in darkness. Actually, it says that they might travel. So there's a sense of movement in this story, that there's a traveling taking place. All right, let's move to the next chapter, chapter 14. So in chapter 14, we're going to see the crossing of the Red Sea, which is also a very familiar story. So the first verse I've highlighted is verse 13, which says, "And Moses said to the people, Fear not, stand firm, and see the salvation of the Lord, which he will work for you today. For the Egyptians whom you see today, you shall never see again." It's a very familiar passage. It's very wonderful, the passage. Yeah, and I really love the initial parts of this passage in terms of the encouragement that Moses is giving the people. Fear not and stand firm. That's an amazing encouragement. But not only did it end there, see the salvation of the Lord, which he will work. Who's working this salvation? The Lord. In all of these things, we can really say that the powerful hand of God was with the people. It was his salvation. It was him bringing the salvation to the people. They did not save themselves from Egypt. They did not open the Red Sea. Like the Red Sea, when they walk through the Red Sea, they can say, this is the hand of God. So I just love the fact that this is the work which he will work for you today. This is the work of God, even in our own lives. Salvation is the work of God. God will work for you today. He's the one who works in our hearts. He's the one who does something in our lives, and that draws us closer to him when he's working in us. Okay, so very popular phrase as well that people like to make nice motivational statements, that the Egyptians you see today you shall never see again, which is good. I mean, I think there are many things that when God works in our lives, there will be things which will completely remain in the past, and we shall move forward into the future, which is amazing. The sins of the past, the struggles of the past, the enemies of the past, you shall never see again. And I believe that, but one thing, as a Bible study, I just want to put on my hat of being a Bible student, is the fact that Moses would have also been speaking literally about these specific Egyptians. Why do I say that? Because we know that as time goes on, Israel still interacts with the Egyptians. So them interacting with the Egyptians was not the end of the road. They're still going to have interactions with the Egyptians, even friendly interactions as well as fighting interactions with the Egyptians. Meaning that what Moses is saying here is about the specific Egyptians that you see today, not that you'll never see an Egyptian ever again. All right, verse 14 is quite interesting. It says that the Lord will fight for you, and you have only to be silent. I love that. The Lord will fight for you, and you have only to be silent. So again, it's just emphasizing what I was saying earlier, that it is God who fights for us. It is God who works in us. It is God, the battle belongs to the Lord. Ours is to be silent. Imagine, you only have to be silent. Why? Because it is God. This thing is God from start to end. Alpha and Omega, beginning and the end. He's the one who's working it out. He's the one who's working it out for us. The Lord will fight for you. I love that verse. Right now, verse 19 says, then the angel of the Lord was going before the host of Israel, moved and went behind them, and the pillar of cloud moved from before them and stood behind them, coming between the host of Egypt and the host of Israel. And there was the cloud of darkness, and it lit up the night without one coming near the other all night. So what's going on here is that the angel of the Lord, who was moving with Israel, he took that pillar of cloud, he put it between Israel and the Egyptians, meaning that they could not access each other until Israel was safe. But the reason why I highlight this verse is because I was wondering, why would the Egyptians want to continue chasing the Israelites when they can clearly see a pillar of cloud? That this pillar of cloud is not a normal cloud. This is the presence of God. Like, why even go after them? And that's it. Why not retreat? And this just goes to show what happens when people have hardened their hearts, and now God has hardened their hearts. Because they were hardening their hearts for a long time, God hardens their hearts. And when people are in sin and God gives them up into their own devices, it means that even when it is clear that, yeah, you're in the wrong place, you must go away, they can't see it. Like right here, they should have seen that they can't fight this battle. Why would they want to fight a battle like this one? A battle where there's a cloud right in front of them, and this cloud is not a normal cloud. This is the presence of God. There was a thickness of a cloud, a pillar of a cloud, which is ensuring that they cannot access the Israelites. Why would they even want to fight? It's because when the hearts have been hardened, you can't even see anymore. You can't even see anymore. And when people continue in sin and God gives them up to their things, they can't even see the real trouble before them. Okay, let me highlight the last verse, which is verse 31. In chapter 14, it says, Israel saw the great power that the Lord used against the Egyptians. So the people feared the Lord, and they believed in the Lord and in his servant Moses. So the only point I want to highlight here is that where there was great power, people feared God. And I really hope and trust that we can see the fact that all of these miracles, all of this great deliverance and great power, even for us today, it should lead to people fearing God and believing in God. So the question is, the miracles that people are experiencing and going through, what do they lead to? Do they lead to a fear of God? Do they lead to a faith in God? Miracles are meant to increase people's faith in the Lord. In the Lord, right? Great power that the Lord used against the Egyptians. The people feared the Lord. So I just highlighted this, seeing that there must be a fear of God when people are walking in great power or witnessing great power. So great power must not lead to other things, only the fear of the Lord and believing in God. All right, so let's go to chapter 15. Here we see the Song of Moses. So I'm just going to highlight some verse in the Song of Moses which I found amazing. Verse 3, I'm not wait. Verse 3 is quite interesting. It says, "The Lord is a man of war. The Lord is his name." Like, it just brings me to my knees. The Lord is his name. The Lord is his name. The Lord is a man of war. The Lord is his name. And then another verse I've highlighted in the Song of Moses is verse 11, which says, "Who is like you, Lord? Who is like you, O Lord, among the gods? Who is like you, majestic in holiness, awesome in glorious deeds, doing wonders?" What a wonderful verse. And then, of course, when Moses says among the gods, it doesn't mean to mean that they are real gods. And of course, it would be speaking in particular the gods of Egypt, right? Who is like you, Lord? So I like that question. Who is like you, Lord? Who is like you, majestic in holiness, awesome in glorious deeds, and doing wonders? All right. So that will be the end of today's lesson, where in chapter 15 we saw the song of Moses, and we also saw Miriam as well, having a song, singing to the Lord. So this is the response that they had when they were delivered. And maybe I can just quickly connect it with the last verse I mentioned from chapter 14, that there was fear and faith in God, right? And they believed in God, they believed in Moses. But here's the amazing thing: they begin to sing to God, they begin to worship God, they begin to dance before the Lord. This joy in the house of the Lord. There's a sense of expressing this celebration because of what the Lord has done. And I believe that when we are truly experiencing the power of God, truly experiencing the mighty hand of God, the response is one where we believe in Him, but also we celebrate, we sing, we worship Him, we bow before Him, and there's a great joy in realizing all that the Lord is doing and has done. Amen and amen.